So I'm making a sword from Adventure Time. Adventure Time. Adventure Time. Adventure Time. An adventure. Adventure Time. Adventure. I wanted to make the one with the handle that looks like a tree branch. So let's get started.
I've still got all of these master swords lying around. Using my art knowledge, I'm going to say that this was supposed to look like an M, but those finger guards on the master sword have always looked like a Whataburger symbol to me. We don't need the Whataburger symbol or the handle for the project that we're working on. So I'm going to chop those off and then clean this thing up on the sander. We have to thin it out a bit so we can wrap our tree branches around it, but not make it too thin and weak so that it's flimsy. I know it's childish, but I want to be able to play with the sword when I'm done with it. Off camera, I prime the sword and then hit it with a little bit of chrome spray paint. It's not the typical way that I like to make a sword look like it's made out of metal. However, the shape of the master sword and all the greebly bits on it prevent me from doing what I usually do. So now I'm just going to go ahead and scuff this bad boy up and make it look like it's seen a lot of battles. A little bit of 1200 or 200 grit sandpaper will work really well for this. I tried to make a mother mold out of some questionable material, and it ended up making my mold very iffy. I had to make several castings, making adjustments here and there to fix little problems that were happening. So I have a lot of these master swords that aren't quite perfect, but I'm taking all the little flaws and using them as free weathering. While every little bit helps, it just wasn't enough, so I had to get out the X-Acto knife and add a little more damage to this blade to make it look like one of Finn's swords. Being an adolescent, he obviously doesn't take care of his swords like he should. It can be satisfying to weather and distress things, but it's even more satisfying knowing that I'm taking these flawed castings, mistakes, and using that to my advantage and turning them into something good. Once I'm satisfied with how distressed the blade is, I need to start working on that gnarled wooden handle. And tinfoil is going to make a great filler and armature for that. I just squish it down into the rough shape I'm looking for, and then I keep refining it. This twist of limbs is going to be mostly some kind of tube shape, like an elongated cylinder that I can just wrap around. Maybe we could think of it like a coil, or maybe you might want to call it a wormy dilly. Whatever you want to call it, reducing things down to basic shapes is the best way to think about this kind of thing. More especially when you're just starting out in sculpture. I wasn't quite satisfied with how it was looking, so I decided to try that one more time. If first you don't succeed, try again. The handle was a little too thick the first go around, so I had to remove some of that plastic with the sander. Now I'm just rewrapping it with that foil. We're just going to cut out another finger guard and tuck that in as if it was growing out of this thing the whole time. Same for the little limb that comes out the bottom. We just lift up some of what we already wrapped and re-put it in. Squish in a little hot glue, and we're golden. Now it's time to make the little lumps that go on top. This is the key to my success. Everyone wants to slump upon these lumps. I would have tried to sing that joke, but right now it would have sounded like the Janis Joplin edition.
If you were wondering why over the course of this video it sounds like I've been chain smoking for over 80 years,
it's because I'm starting to get sick.
As an educator, losing your voice is like absolutely debilitating.
Now after some final adjustments, I'm satisfied with the shapes. It's time to skin this thing out in polymer clay. Sometimes I roll this through my jewelry roller and make little thin slabs and sheets of this clay, but because of the size and shape that I need, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out little thin slices, and I'm not even going to bother. One thing I noticed when I started applying the polymer clay to the tinfoil is that the clay has gotten a little dried out. I could have added a little baby oil or Vaseline to it to restore it, but I didn't. I could have also massaged it around in my fingers until it got a lot more easy to work with, but I didn't do that either. These little sheets were already kind of exactly what I needed, so I didn't want to mess them up and have to re-roll them out into slabs. So I just muscled through it. Besides, these are limbs. I figured there's going to be some cracks and things like that in there anyway. If anything, it's going to make it look better. Alright? So, yeah. So I'm taking a lot of care to make sure that I'm stuffing these fleshy flaps down into the cracks, because I want to retain my definition and make it look like this limb is coiled around itself and that it's not one solid thing, except that it is, because it's all one limb. But I guess it's like separate coils. Okay, I'll shut up now. I probably need to rest this voice anyway. This is a wooden modeling tool. I cannot recommend these things enough. They're wonderful for sculpting and blending and rendering. Without a doubt, this would definitely make it into my top 10 sculpture tools list. Besides, when society collapses, we can use these for tongue depressors. You might have noticed that a lot of times when I'm forcing the clay down into these crevices with my modeling tool, I'm holding the other side with my other hand. I don't want the other side to come untucked. This is a lot like the fitted sheets of sculpting. Now that I'm done with one side, I'll skip to fast forward. This side is going to be a lot like the other side, and I don't want to bore you guys. Though if you're watching this to get your sculpture fix, you can just put this on a slower speed and still enjoy it. Now I'm fashioning the little forked ends of the branch, and I'm going to put them on with hot glue. The other side was a bit too short and thin, so I'm going to add quite a bit more foil to it before I add the fork. I'm also going to put the fork in with a different method. We're going to engage in a little bit of tinfoil bonsai trimming. There we go. Very zen. Now we will just bifurcate the one here on the end as well. Then we will wrap this bad boy up in a fleshy little flap of polymer clay. Every step of this journey, I want to keep using my modeling tool to make it look like one of these limbs is laying over the next, and that it's not all just a chunk of polymer clay. We're in that home stretch now. There we go, completely fleshed out and ready for the next step. Although it looks a little gross now, I can start to envision the finished product. If you're just now getting into sculpting, that's one of the things you have to realize. You got to stick with it through that slump in every project where it just doesn't look like anything yet. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride. It'll go from looking terrible to great, back and forth over and over until it's finished. If you're wondering why I'm massaging this flesh-looking clay with a ball of tinfoil, I'm adding texture to it. A wadded up ball of tinfoil actually makes a pretty decent texture tool. I might try this massage technique out on my wife. Who knows? I'm kind of a love expert. I should write a book or something. It's worth the time and effort it takes to get these nice points on these limbs. It would ruin the whole illusion if this limb had rounded tips. Now we'll just cure this polymer clay with my heat gun. Originally I wanted to put the sound effects in here from the heat gun, but someone was talking. Now it looks super fake. Maybe I can just make the sound myself. Now I'm just giving it a good test to make sure everything is cured and stable and sturdy. I ended up breaking one piece off. Also, I was not satisfied with the travel in this handle. That clay was not strong enough to keep it firm and solid. I'm going to fix some of the damage with sculpture epoxy. Once I get that done, I can worry about solidifying this handle a bit. It comes in a part A and a part B that have to be mixed together in order to start the chemical reaction. And it's great for dry, irritated eyes. Yes, I did notice that I'm starting to sound a bit like Ben Stein. We'll just mix A and B together really good until we get one solid color. That way we know that all of this will cure at the appropriate time. So now it's time to get patching. It just won't do to have your sword look hollow. Gotta add back in some texture for believability. I also have to make sure that the texture matches on all the little patches that I put in place. To make the handle less flexible and more durable, I'm going to use my Epsilon Pro again. I've done several videos on it before, and so I'm not going to go into great detail explaining it this time. This is a 2-part epoxy. It's great for turning styrofoam hard. You just mix A and B together and stir it very thoroughly, and it has a lot of other purposes as well. It's one of the more durable and strong coatings that you can put on different art mediums. Now you're supposed to mix it for a whole minute, but I'm fast forwarding here just so you guys know I mixed it a lot longer than what it shows. Now I'm just gonna slather this epoxy goodness all over this handle in hopes that it'll make it more durable. You can clean these brushes up, but I highly recommend you use a disposable brush or a brush that you were gonna get rid of anyway. As a matter of fact, a lot of times I'll just put on my rubber gloves and just rub this stuff on with my hands. Hey, that's another massage idea. I think it's this flesh-colored polymer clay that keeps bringing my mind back to massages. I usually use gray polymer clay instead of Sculpting brand, but this stuff was on sale. The next day, I'm ready to test it out. It feels really solid and firm. It did everything I hoped it would do. Now I just want to give it a once-over with this sandpaper so that this coating has a little bit of tooth, so that the paint doesn't just fall off of it later. I've been getting some questions about painting on this stuff, and you can. You just have to rough it up a little bit so that the paint has something to adhere to. The next step is to mask off this blade with some masking tape. That way we don't ruin this beautiful faux metal finish that we have on the blade. I always get the 3-inch thick tape, that way I can tear it off into the sizes that I need. Put a little bit of primer on here and everything's looking good so far. Now to put a little paint on this bad boy. I'm just glad to get rid of that flesh color. Yeah, I'm not gonna make a joke. This is a kid-friendly channel. Alright, we're gonna use the 3 primary colors. A lot of people don't know it, but you can mix your own brown by using the primary colors. You just got to get the right proportions. It gives you a lot of freedom. You can make the exact brown you're looking for. I'm going to do this in fast forward, that way you can get an idea of how to do it, but I'm not going to make you watch it in real time. Watching paint being mixed could be pretty boring. So that's when I realized I didn't like the texture, and I decided to start So now I'm going to take a little bit of PVA glue, and I'm going to take some tissue paper, and then I'm going to saturate that paper in the glue and use that to make some really nice textures. So I'm just going to take this combo and lay it out on my sword in a fashion that pleases me. I want it to fit in a way that it doesn't look like paper, but I also don't want to smooth it out too much. Putting those wrinkle-like textures on here was the whole point. We want to be really careful to retain those points. Once again, we do not want to ruin the illusion. We let that dry overnight. Now we're going to put on another coat of the Epsilon Pro to make sure it's nice and strong. I cleaned the other brush with mineral spirits, but this time I used one that I was going to throw away anyway. This brush keeps leaking hairs out all over my students' paintings. Once again, we let it set overnight, and it feels wonderful. After testing it to see how it turned out, we're ready to put a tooth on it again. We gotta scuff it up so that paint will adhere. But this time, I'm gonna use a Dremel tool. This wire wheel should make short work of the process. I mainly use the sandpaper to show you guys that it can be done, although every once in a while it's easier just to grab a piece of sandpaper than it is to get out my tools. It just depends on how big the job is. Eventually I want to set up a Dremel tool station so that it's always out and ready. Now you can see how dull and scuffed up it is. That's how you know it's ready to take paint. This time I'm going to try a different color scheme.
So that's when it struck me that I still didn't like the texture.
Time to break out the Dremel tool again. This time I have an actual wood in mind, and I'm going to take this little disc and really rough up the texture to try and emulate what I'm aiming for. Also, I lost some of my definition with all these coatings, so I'm going to take this Dremel tool and kind of cut this apart so that it looks like it's not growing together anymore. And I'll just kind of feather that out with my Dremel tool. I don't want it to look like I just cut in here, which is what I did. So I have to round these edges off a little bit. Since I'm from Louisiana, I decided to try and make this thing look like a cypress tree. So I'm going to start with a very warm brown undercoat or base coat. Now that we got some good coverage and the paint is dry, it's time for the next layer. That means we're going to do a brush over of gray paint. When you do a brush over, you want to hit the raised areas, being careful to leave some of the color beneath showing. It's already starting to look much better than it did before. I think this just shows the importance of actually having a plan and knowing what you want the outcome to look like. We're just going to add a few more layers to this thing of different grays and give it some variety and some believability. Each time we'll be careful to let some of the layer before it shine through. We don't want to lose any of that. As you can see, I'm mixing with the handle of my brush. This allows me to have a lot faster cleanup. If you mix with the brush part, it's really hard to get all that paint out of the brush. This is really important because I'm about to do a dry brush. You can see I loaded up my brush and then dried it off on that paper. Now I'm just lightly dusting the raised areas. That way they stay more pronounced. Now I'm making a dark wash. I'm going to get my paint really runny, and that's going to allow all that dark paint to run in all of the recesses of my texture. So I just highlighted all the raised areas with a dry brush, and now I'm kind of unifying it all and accentuating those crevices and recesses with my dark wash. Usually I'll use oil washes for things like this, but since this is the handle of my toy sword, I don't want my sword to be sticky and gummy for months and months while I wait on the oil paint to dry. The outcome of this combo is really rich and enjoyable. Now we're going to do one more dry brush just to kind of bring back some of those highlights. I'll find that it works really well if you have a beat up old brush for dry brushing, or I've also heard that you can use a makeup brush. So I'm going to use a beat up old makeup brush and just combine the two. The benefit of using an old beat up brush is that the stray hairs really add to the random effect of everything. Once again, I'm mixing with the handle of my brush. Then I'm going to load my brush. Whoa, 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 whoa. I almost stuck my brush in the wrong paint. Now I'm going to dab it dry on this paper towel and just go to town on it. Now I know this looks really light, but just remember that this is acrylic paint and it's going to darken as it dries. It's kind of scary putting on the dark wash because everything looks too dark, and then it's kind of scary putting on these highlights as well because everything looks too light. You just have to muscle through and trust your experience. The recesses between each limb look too light now, so I'm going to exaggerate that with some dark washes down in between these crevices. That's going to exaggerate the shadows and make these recesses look even deeper than they are. And right now it looks a little bit hard edge, but this stuff's going to seep down and it's going to have a little bit more of a gradient when it's done. Now that that's dry, we can flock it. I'm going to be using clump foliage from Woodland Scenic. That's right, you can just buy little bags of foliage. Even though this detail is not on the sword in the cartoon, I wanted this old branch to look like it had moss growing on it. The clump foliage was too large for this scale, so I'm going to go ahead and rip it to bits and glue it on with some PVA glue. Probably the best way to do this is take a brush and just paint on the glue wherever you want to add the foliage. Since the glue dries clear, you'll never see the excess glue. Here you'll see me demonstrate that technique. From here on out, whenever you're hiking and you see some old moss, just think of old Mr. Jones. Beautiful, lovable Mr. Jones. As you can see, everything is a sculpture tool. Womp womp. Now to lock in all of this clumpy goodness, I'm going to use some PVA glue watered down with isopropyl alcohol. You can buy these little glass eyedropper bottles at Amazon, of course. You can get everything there. You can also water down your PVA glue with water and spritz your clump foliage with isopropyl alcohol first. So that's another way to do the same thing, but this works pretty good for me. You just have to remember to shake your glue bottle up really good before you start squirting, because this stuff tends to separate over time. Now that all the messy stuff is done, we can remove the masking tape. It's fun. It's like opening up a Christmas present. With that done, it's time to roll the glamour shots. I'm really satisfied with how this piece turned out. It's really fun, it looks good. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me make this. What's more, I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this and you appreciate what I'm doing here, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Give me some comments, give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.